Welcome to X-Men Evolution, episode 23 of Cyclops is Waiting for Me, an X-Men animated recap podcast. I'm JC, and the year's almost over, Rod.
Yeah.
And we didn't get X-Men 97.
No, well, watch them.
We got toys.
Just because we said that, when this goes up in posts, X-Men 97 will just have released that day.
The day before, even on a non-traditional Disney Plus release day. It'll release on a Sunday, just out of spite to us.
And I'm Rod, and it'll have been way past Thanksgiving by the time you hear this, but I'm excited for Thanksgiving because it hasn't happened yet. We're recording this.
And also, as we're recording, we are both hungry, so the thought of food is very enticing to either of us.
Yes, that's great. And now all I can think about is corn casserole, so it's really good stuff. You shouldn't eat it year-round, though. It's too much stuff. Anyway, Cyclops is Waiting for Me is our weekly podcast series where we're going back and watching every single X-Men animated episode we can find, along with some bonus episodes. Our first series started with the original 1992 X-Men the Animated Series, building up to the release of X-Men 97, which we thought was coming to Disney Plus, like we said. Not happening.
I'm not removing it from the script until the next episode. Because we have one more episode that's going to air for us in 2023. I'm keeping it in for that last episode.
Just so that they can prove us wrong.
Yes. Again, Disney operates purely on spite.
Right.
And pixie dust, right?
Yeah, I mean, more of the first thing, but I mean, you've seen what they've been putting out lately. But since it's not here yet, we needed to find some other shows to cover. We've been quite enjoying the high school trauma of Evolution.
It's the best edition. Some quick reminders: we're a recap show about a series that came out over 20 years ago. There are going to be spoilers. If you don't want it spoiled for you, pause the podcast, watch the episode, and most importantly, come back. We're not sponsored, as you can't tell, or affiliated with Marvel Animation, Disney, or Disney Plus, the Spike Company, in any way, shape, or form.
And don't forget to follow us on social media at Cyclops IWFM Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, X, and Facebook. Oh, I swiped away the wrong screen. And of course,
there's only one line left. Come on.
Follow us on Facebook, and of course, make sure to follow us on your favorite podcast services.
Now on to the show. Today we're going to be talking about season 2, episode 8, titled Mindbender. It aired on January 26th of 2002. So first episode of 2002. Currently sits at a 7.3 star rating on IMDb. I did double check it. The two episodes back to back were both 7.3 ratings.
So this is that break that I mentioned a few episodes ago that a lot of shows would take, between the holidays. So it's a month or two, month and a half.
Yeah, roughly 6 weeks or so. They would have the mid-season finale. You get reruns during the holidays because, especially for appointment viewing, you would be fucked. So
yeah. Even I forgot that when you had to be home for a show, you had to be home for a show.
And to get DVDs and stuff like that, even going into the DVD era, it was 6 months to 9 months after the finale of that season before you would even be able to buy it.
I mean, I remember someone talking about the Aladdin video game, and that game came out a year after the movie was in theaters, and they were like, well, you remember in the 90s, home releases didn't happen until a year later, so they were timing the video game release with the home release. It was like, wow, you're right. When we saw Aladdin in theaters, we had gone and lived a year of life, and then the VHS.
We probably wasted it, though.
Right.
The year after Aladdin, we probably wasted.
Yeah.
But this episode, Mindbender, anything come to mind at the start of it before we got into the episode itself, from the name?
Not aside from the characters we already knew, Xavier and Jean and stuff. And there was the main villain that we see throughout. I saw him on the thumbnail, but he didn't look familiar to me.
Interestingly enough, the villain, the way he had the facial markings, I thought was one of the Inhumans, because there is Karnak from the Inhumans, who, especially if you look at the comic book version of him, don't look at the garbage live action MCU-ish adjacent, now not actually MCU show.
It's one of the branches that Loki let go.
He literally is an Iron Fist, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., toss, but definitely Inhumans. That was the first thing he let go. Totally reminded me of Karnak visually.
Yeah, I could see that. And then there was a shot in the middle of this episode that I thought they were going to reveal it was a piece of Xavier or something, because it looked like his face with the face markings. Right.
Kind of what was it? The bad Xavier, the Phantom Xavier?
With the angry eyebrows.
The angry eyebrows, yeah. How would this have fallen around the time of Onslaught, actually, now that you say that?
I'm not sure.
Onslaught and Marvel debuted in 1996, so it would have been in a post-Onslaught era, so yeah.
Yeah.
which was half the consciousness of Xavier. So.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I thought you knew that. My bad. I forget you're not as big of a fucking nerd as me. Sorry.
I mean, I will, like, there's, like, I have huge gaps in my comic book knowledge, so every once in a while I will know something, but for the most part, probably not. It's like Swiss cheese.
Spoiler for a comic book that came out 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Onslaught was the consciousness of Xavier and Magneto together.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Some Rick and Morty shit.
I know.
Well, they did an episode of that this season.
Oh, the Jerry shit.
Yeah, Jerry and Rick.
Yeah, the less said about that show this season, the better. Kicks off, it's a rainy carnival, and it starts off very, like, horror movie vibes, because you see somebody's foot steps into a puddle, it starts to pan up, and then you see it's, like, Jean, who is just in, like, a sleeping shirt with no shoes, and I was like, oh, okay, that's got to be a nightmare scenario.
She's also, like, she's stretched out, too.
Was she?
Her proportions are, like, a little bit... I feel like they could have gone more extreme with it to signal more, but she wasn't, like... Because they're so consistent with the human proportions in this. This is like a little bit like more distorted. And
then as she's walking through, there's like laughing clowns, which this is nightmare fuel. This I don't have a fear of clowns, but if I was having this as a repeated nightmare, I would have a fear of clowns.
Yeah, and it wasn't just one, because it started off it looked like it was going to be like one creepy clown robot thingy.
Yeah, and then you get reveal of multiples, and then they become giants, and then it just falls on her, which is the best way for like the dream to end.
Yeah, it's like it kills you in your dream.
And then she wakes up floating, which had a very similar vibe to me of when Kitty like had her nightmare and she like was using her powers unconsciously as she was sleeping.
Yeah, and granted, Jean didn't scream or anything, but this was one of the rare times that the entire mansion didn't like run into her room, it's someone's room in the middle of the night terror.
Right. And then you see there's a Jack-in-the-Box that is right next to her bed. And in any scenario, that is creepy. Like, why would you ever have a Jack-in-the-Box next to your bed? Like, even if you have children, that is still creepy to me.
I was wondering about that because I was like, if that wasn't there before and she didn't just leave the room, like that's the difference between Jean's character and Storm. Storm, when she was being chased by the shadow, she's like, nope, elevator.
Yeah.
And Jean's like, let me put this on my lap, because it was running by itself, wasn't it? Like the thing was like cranking itself, and then she's like, let me finish it.
And then it does the jump scare of the green face. And that was the first time I was like, why is Karnak in there? That makes no sense. And then we jump over to the animated intro. It's a quicker intro in this one. I do like that they're not always consistent on the time frame for them. It's like you have some that are like a 30-second. You have some that are like 4 fucking minutes, I feel like.
Yeah, it's whatever it needs to be to exposition the story.
So next day, everybody's searching for Jean. Xavier is in the room with Scott, and then somebody mentions that the Jack-in-the-Box is just, it's something she won at the carnival last week. And so that becomes this, the gun the entire episode, basically, just sitting there.
And now when they said that, I was like, that makes it worse. You throw that away. You're like, okay, cool. It was fun to play that game, and then
it's like, oh well, yeah, she just kind of vanished, and it's like, that's not one of her powers,
right?
You can't do that.
I do like how they tied it to the Jack-in-the-Box, though. They're like, this spooky item might be the key.
Nope. Totally blown off, not the key. And then jump over, and you see that Hank is essentially speed reading the internet.
Remember when we had to look up
microfilm and microfiche?
Yeah, microfiche. I was like, yeah, he's just looking through microfiche. And yeah, I guess it's not archive. So he's doing the archive. Not archive. Is archive the right word?
It can't be referenced. Like, it's not searching the actual terms and such. Yeah. But it's also like, we talked about this in a previous episode, probably when we were talking about 92. But like, the world didn't move at the speed of the internet like that. Like, if something had happened the middle of the night, it was not going to be in the newspapers the next morning because people were not going to websites for their news. They were literally still picking up the paper on that regular basis. Shit happens at 3 a.m. What paper is going to be covering that the next day?
Indexed. That's the word I was looking for.
Indexed.
And do I remember correctly that some days newspapers would come at different times than others? Like, I vaguely remember this, where it was like Sunday morning had a newspaper, but I feel like the other days they were like midday or something. I can't remember.
It all depended, but I do know there were certain ones where you could have like an evening edition, and you could have like 2 sets of news on the same day to an extent.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of, because it was like, if it didn't make the morning paper, then you knew it was going to come late. Like, we just knew when we were going to see something.
And then they also mentioned that Cerebro hasn't detected anything, which at least they're trying all, the different routes for this.
And they mentioned because Jean hadn't used her powers, so
it wasn't detecting. Quick note, forgot to say it on the last episode, but people probably listened to this in order. I thought it was interesting that they were like, well, we would have detected Warren using his powers if Cerebro wasn't being repaired. Mm-hmm. Is him flapping his wings considered using his powers?
Yeah, that's a good question. Or do they...
Or like Beast being blue, is he just constantly like low level using his power?
You wonder, like, is the mutation some sort of thing like the muscle control or the strength to control whatever your thing is, you know?
Obviously, Scott shoots a thing. Bobby makes ice. Jean uses telepathy.
I guess that's kind of like when Sunspot spiked the volleyball, and then was it Berserker was like you cheated. You use your power, so I guess maybe that was that they were alluding to, like he could have activated a power of like strength.
I think Berserker was just being like a whiny bitch about it, to be totally honest.
I think it like kind of implies though that like that could have been
like low level, like
something, I don't know.
But sorry, just had to point that out really quickly. So yeah, then we go through like this whole montage of people searching for Jean, and you see the Circus of Mystery flyer, which if you haven't picked up that something is going on with the clowns and the event, they're hitting you over the head with it. There's no missing this one. And then Scott, what was absolutely okay in 2001, 2002, which is he is using his phone, top down in his convertible, just phone up to his face the entire time because nobody cared about safety on streets while you were driving back then.
And also, it signaled that he was probably pretty wealthy because it looked like it might have been like an early flip phone or something. And so for like 2001, it wasn't common for high school students, I think, to like have,
It was at that starting era of high school students having it. Like I will admit, I had one my senior year of school, but it also only had a limited number of minutes because we were still paying for minutes every month, I
guess that's a good point. They are in an emergency scenario, and we haven't seen Scott with it like a lot before, so maybe this was like, okay, this is when you're going to use the phone.
And he actually calls Duncan.
Yeah. What's that phone call like?
Awkward. And I love that it's only one side of it. Yeah. Also, I feel like Duncan is not at all fucking concerned that his girlfriend is missing.
Yeah, right? Because he's like, no, don't worry about it. He's like, what do you mean don't worry about it? Don't she live with you guys?
Yeah, shouldn't you of all people know where the fuck she is? Mm-hmm. Also calls Taryn because we got to remember that he's friends, or he's dating her best friend. Then we have Spike at the John can't read this word. Oh, at the police station.
That's where he was. I just saw him skateboard. I didn't realize where he was.
But again, it's the Spike being the ballsy kid because he's the one who's been arrested.
Yeah. So he knows him already.
But we're also pretty sure that Xavier mind wiped the police station.
Oh, that's true.
But then he like grinds his skateboard down the staircase too.
Sticking it to the man.
Rogue goes to the record shop, which looked like the same background from the previous episode. Kitty goes to the Brotherhood house, and apparently there's like a mini fight with Lance, and she gives the great like, "What? It's not like you guys haven't tried abducting her before."
I like that line.
That was such a good throwback.
It's like, this is true. This would have been the first place we checked.
Right? Yeah. Blob is looking for love yet again, and it doesn't go well. Back of the mansion, Bobby, Sam, Berserker, and Jubilee are like, well, shouldn't we be like looking for her? And, they're like, well, the others said we still have to go to class, but there's no teachers around. So they decide they're going to do their own mini lesson within the danger room.
I like that this group of younger students are kind of like the troublemakers, and they're just like in a little group, just getting into stuff.
They're really dumb, and Bobby being the ringleader is what like is shocking to me because he seems like he's probably the worst of them.
Yeah. They keep putting him in these like positions of leadership. Because like when he was like flying the
X-Jet,
and stuff. It's like after like the second or third time of crashing that, maybe we rotate someone else in as a potential pilot.
I guess because they do the whole like Sam is kind of like the country bumpkin is why he's like just follow along. I feel like Jubilee would not put up with his shit, and I guess Berserker is just kind of like this like clean slate of like we don't know anything about this character aside from he thinks that Sunspot cheated. Sunspot should probably be the leader realistically.
Yeah. Because volleyball's not a superpower yet. So they have multiple show up who they're like, yeah, we're not going to let you in. And they just kind of like leave him as the odd man out. And I think this was one of those times where we got the clearest picture of how young Multiple is supposed to be by comparison, because he has the voice of a little kid, not like a high school freshman. Like he literally sounds like a 10-year-old at most, I was gonna say, like, because you told me last time we saw him that he was supposed to be younger. I was like, oh, I guess I could see that. And this one, they really leaned into it. Like, he was like the little brother that wants to like sneak out of the house with you or go ride bikes or something. And you're like, no.
Yeah, and maybe it's just because we've gotten more time with him of him animating and stuff like that. But it's like he feels like he's too young to even be in high school at this point.
Yeah, like he seems like not even junior high. Like he seems like he might even be like an elementary student or something.
Which meant he manifested powers earlier in life than anybody else, which is also weird.
It's also scary if you're like his parents. Like you had one kid, now you have like 12 or something when they sneeze.
I was gonna say when he gets hit.
Yeah.
Oh my god! Imagine if it was that kind of a household. That would just be the worst thing possible.
It's like Boom Boom. He came from like an abusive household, and that's why his powers manifested so early. That's so sad. Okay.
Congratulations, you have made Jamie Madrox a darker character than this version of Boom Boom.
There you go.
Wow. Like darker than Boom Boom, darker than Rogue. Like, you went there, Rod. But yeah, Jubilee stops him. He doesn't get to go into the danger room. Jump over, and Logan is at the bus station. Asks the ticket guy, oh, have you seen this girl? He's like, yeah, she was here at about 4 a.m. And it's like, that doesn't seem weird to you that a teenage girl is at a bus station at 4 a.m.
He's like, it's New York. This happens every day.
Yeah, he's like, I don't give a shit. And she took the bus to Boston.
I have some questions about the travel in this.
The bus to Boston is the one that I'm okay with. The rest of it, I completely know where you're going with it.
But mainly because the bus to Boston, I feel like set like the benchmark of like how travel was going to go. So it's like, okay, so you would take a bus to Boston.
From New York,
that's our baseline. And then after here, the choices don't make sense.
But yeah, bus to Boston. Then they get back to the Institute, and Cerebro confirms that she's in Boston. It's like, so we could have all just waited, is what you're telling me. There had to be no search because she was eventually going to use her power.
That's true, yeah.
Jean shows up at a mansion, breaks the gate, just like pops out the windows, and then she steals a ring. And that was not what I was expecting to happen. Like, I have zero idea of what's going on in this story from like a previous like scenario, but it was just like, this was all just to steal a ring?
Yeah, and because it was in glasses, like I guess it's like a museum or something. But
or is at least somebody's private vault kind of scenario, like a private collector?
Yeah. For a second, I thought maybe they were gonna, what do they call it in the show? The Cyteract.
Yeah,
Cyteract. But
I could have seen that. Yeah, it was like because the first one was red, right?
I think so. Yeah, that's
let's go with that. Yeah, mini crystal of Cyteract. So yeah. So she steals it. The police arrive, and off camera, and I'm sure this was a standards and practices thing, she fucks up those cars.
I couldn't decide if it was standards and practices or like a cost-cutting thing. You just show the cop cars on the ground and then in the trees, but no in between. But I could see either way.
If I had a wager, I would wager it was you cannot show violence towards a police officer.
Yeah.
From a hero.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you see they still haven't left because Scott runs in. He's like, all right, jet's ready to go. And they're like, yeah, Cerebro's basically telling us she's already left.
This whole episode is Cerebro being like, well, fuck you guys.
Cerebro's like, you really fucked up my RAM when you installed this update. I am running at 20% right now.
Yeah, like, you just got to give me an extra hour to whatever you think, and then we'll get it sorted.
And then I think I wrote down Scott is confused.
Oh, because he doesn't want to wait for her to.
Yeah.
Because they.
Oh, he's confused that she's doing the stuff. That's what it is. Yeah.
Because you're like, she stole the ring, and then Beast is like, she's not going to stay there. And I'm like, was he mocking? That's so much. Like, we're just going to have to wait to the next place she goes.
So my next comment that I made is the New Mutants suck.
Yeah, they're in the danger room.
Yeah, because they basically like barely made it out with their lives.
Yeah, they like these like tentacle things have got them. They actually start working it out. Like it's really clumsy, but they start like working together. Like two of them, I think it was a Berserker and Bobby.
Well, Bobby figures out that if they start combining their powers in like tag team maneuvers effectively, they could break out. Yeah, so he gets Berserker. Jubilee is like, fuck this, I'm out. Let's chalk this up as an L. And then the doors shut in front of them. They get locked back in, and new traps pop out.
Like all of them.
Yeah, all of them at once. All the things that should murder these children.
Yeah, my note was they can't get out of the danger room, and it goes into murder mode.
And then you see that Multiple is in the control room doing this. Are we going to get like an evil version of Jamie out of this story? Because I feel like he's very much Kevin from fucking Home Alone right now.
I like that because he had no remorse. He was like, ha ha ha.
No, he was kind of excited by it.
Yeah, and it also seemed just the way they showed him when they revealed it was him. It didn't look like he was just mashing buttons. Like he knew.
Oh, he was conscious of it. Yeah, like he's actually worse than Arcade because Arcade was at least under the illusion that he was playing a video game.
Yeah, I was actually the way they framed Jamie when they showed him was like, oh man, that looks like that Arcade video game cover from the Sega. He was like above the control room and stuff.
Mm-hmm. I also love that when I had the memory of that, I had the Super Nintendo version, right, which we posted on our feed. And then when I was doing the lookup, I found there was the other one, which was the one you were talking about. Yeah. And that just comes from being a Super Nintendo house versus a Sega Genesis house, you know?
Yeah, because I have the Sega one, and that had Arcade in the corner.
Yep.
Like looking down on everybody.
But they do eventually overcome, make their way out. Their clothes are shredded. Like, people are missing shoes. And then, you know, they see Multiple and they know that he did it. And they can't even chase him because they are all so tired. They're like, it's fine, we'll get him tomorrow.
I love that reaction. It was so real. Like, yeah, it was a Jubilee. It's just like, we'll get it even with you tomorrow morning.
It's such an interesting, like, B story because it doesn't have a payoff in this episode either. Like, I feel like it's a, like, C story at this point, you know?
Yeah, it's like an extension of Joyrides. Like, these are the kids that just want to, like, mess with everything in the mansion. I'll say they learned nothing from the Joyride episode.
Nothing at all. Bobby especially, like unreal. Like, it's not the worst version of Bobby, but it's not a very smart version of Bobby.
Yeah.
Cut to the evening. Jean arrives and does a thumb scan at the door as her biometric to get in there. Scott is tossing and turning in bed, and we see that it turns 1 o'clock. I also love that he literally sleeps with his glasses on.
I was thinking about that.
As somebody with glasses, let's talk about that, Rod, because I don't wear glasses, so... Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't like. So I actually have a pair by my bed that are like narrower,
right?
So it's not as weird when I'm laying down. But also, I have a cat; she'll chew on my glasses. But if I can get away with it, if I'm just like looking at my phone, I'll just take them off because it's not comfortable because they'll just be here. But then that sent me down like this rabbit hole of like, that's right, because like, what if he's sleeping and he
suddenly opens his eyes, waking up?
Yeah, or you know, you're like half asleep and you're just like, I don't know what the control is of like that valve of his eyelid, you know, with the optic blast. Like, if he like kind of squints or like whatever, I don't know, like how does that work? So yeah, they just presented so many questions.
All of a sudden, this just became the biggest logistical problem Rod has ever had with an X-Men character.
That might explain why he was tossing and turning, because it is not comfortable laying down on your side with glasses on.
But the logistic that drove me insane, he is in this house, which now has, what, like 18 people in it, between the New Mutants, the teachers, whatever, and he slept with his door open.
Yeah, I wonder.
No teenage boy is sleeping with their door open, number one.
So there was a couple things I was wondering about that. Either he's doing that because it's like he's the leader and that's a strategy thing in case Jean does come home, like that was the purpose of it. Or there's like, I'm not saying that Xavier would be this kind of person, but like in a lot, when I was growing up, and especially in like religious households and stuff, in co-ed circumstances, that would be a rule to make sure like no hanky-panky was going on. He's like, your bedroom door is always open. I don't see them thinking that far ahead in this show for that. But if also, I was running a school,
Xavier would know.
Yeah,
he would absolutely invade their privacy, and he would know if people were getting it on in the mansion.
Yeah, but also if I were to run a school like this, where it's just a bunch of like hormonal teenagers
with the power of nuclear weapons, yeah,
there's so many things, like, and they're all animated to be like kind of attractive and stuff. Like I would also be like, all your room doors are open. Like,
you actually don't have doors.
Yeah.
You have one very tiny room in there that you cannot fit two people in. That's where you get dressed, and that's it.
But I'm sure they just did that just so that they could write in that he saw her walk by the door.
She walks by, he runs out, and then she just like psychically drops him without saying a word.
It's like the Men in Black, the Flash thing. It's like, shh. Except he doesn't forget.
No, he doesn't forget anything.
I thought that's what she did to him. It was like the mind wipe thing.
Yep.
She learned.
No, she did not. But she telekinetically puts Scott back in bed, and then you see Kurt wakes up in a trance, and then the next morning Scott wakes up, which their security is awful. If you're looking for a person and they use their code to get into the system, that should alert you. The Cerebro security upgrade is trash. I'm sorry.
I like the idea of, even though this is supposed to be really high-tech and futuristic technology, they have
no common sense.
Well, it's from the perspective of the late 90s, essentially. So you can only, that's why like every futuristic aesthetic still has like a retro, like foundation. Like 70s futuristic is different than 90s futuristic. And so there's like this limited thing where like they're not connecting the systems. Right. Yeah, so if someone you're looking for scans in, it doesn't connect to any other system.
Yeah, there's no intranet. It's literally just it has everybody's thumb code and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like using your Touch ID on your iPhone. Your Touch ID does not go across multiple devices when that was like on your iPad and stuff. So, but yeah, Scott is yelling to Xavier that Kurt is gone. And then Kitty and Beast are now being hackers together.
Yeah.
And I say hackers specifically, not in a joking way, because they've literally tapped into security footage from an airport and they have facial recognition scan happening.
I would love it if in this commentary you're like, oh yeah, Kitty becomes a hacker. It's just her trying to make like flip-flops out of hot glue. It's like, I'm hacking Beast, aren't I?
I hate you. I hate you so much right now for that callback. It's so bad, Rod. I am sure that the people who are listening love hearing the disgust in my voice, but I want you to know I am actually angry at you right now.
That's how Beast would also act if Kitty did that. He's like,
oh, absolutely. You're expelled. I'm the Logan in this scenario. Let's be real.
You're expelled. Go home.
But yeah, they do the facial recognition and they realize that she's in New York and they're going to fly to New York.
So they said, yeah, New York City, right? And
yes.
And they're in the Westchester area?
Yes, which is 50 miles away. Okay, I literally looked this up last night. The White Plains Airport, which is the one in Westchester, you cannot fly into JFK or LaGuardia. It is too short a trip for them to make that jump.
I was going to say, okay, I guess I didn't know that it was that close to White Plains. I've worked like fashion gigs when I worked in audio in White Plains, and we flew into NYC to get to White Plains. So, yeah. And that's why I was saying the benchmark of the bus earlier. I was like, so you take a bus to Boston, but not to New York City?
Well, I was a little more concerned on the, like, even if she was flying from Boston to New York, they flew to New York.
Yeah.
Like, they're like taking off in the jet, and I'm like, and you're there. Done.
Yeah. Like, your ascent is already there.
Yeah.
You don't even have enough time to, like, come back down.
But yeah, Jean and Nightcrawler, they land at the Township Bank at the corner of 5th and Byram. And because we did no prep for this entire episode, let's look at what is 5th and Byram, New York. I can't type today. That would be not in Manhattan. That's what it would be.
None of this geography makes sense.
None. The geography in this show is just broken, and I have to accept it.
Like, where are you flying? Like, why are you flying?
Well, it's kind of like if you go back to Daredevil and they mentioned Hell's Kitchen, the location of where they were was not actually Hell's Kitchen. There was something where it was like the other side of Manhattan at that point. So,
oh man,
yeah.
I wonder like how, because the people that are making this happen, they have to know, right? And if they're just like, it's fine, this is a cartoon or whatever.
It's very much it's fine. Don't listen to the nerds who are going to complain about it on the internet and or a podcast.
Right. And actually, kind of tangent adjacent, I ran a little experiment on my TikTok where I talk about the pop songs and stuff. I don't know if you remember Natasha Bedingfield's very first single, not the big one, but the very first single she released was called These Words.
Yes.
In the States. And in the very first line, she says...
it was not as good as Unwritten, but it was a solid song.
Yeah, it was a good song, but yeah, it never got as popular. It didn't get as popular as Unwritten, but she said she couldn't think of a song to write. So in that first line, she says, so I threw some chords together. The combination was D, E, F. And I only included in this video because this has driven me crazy for 20 years, that those are not the chords she's singing when they're playing. And so in the video I posted like, this is what is playing there, and it's close. Mm-hmm. This is what it would sound like if you played what she's singing at those notes. And this is going way too nitpicky, but I was like, what she's actually outlining for you in those words are the bass line. So those are the notes that are playing in the bass, not the chords. Okay. But because she says, I threw some chords together, the combination was D, E, F. It leads you to believe that she's playing the D, E, F chords, but it's just the bass notes. And it was probably just easier flow-wise to say that. Her and the writers in the room like, no one's going to fucking know.
Except for like some nerd on TikTok.
Yeah, and I'm like, let me get my phone piano. And I'm like, here, is this chord? Is this chord? I never do that on.
I was gonna say, I don't think I've seen you do that on your TikTok either. That's hilarious.
It's an experiment. And then someone tagged Natasha, so we'll see if she sees it.
We'll see if she likes you like some of the others, or if she hates you. We'll find out.
Jesus. Oh, I hope she likes me. I love her.
We'll tag her in this episode.
Hey, Natasha.
Imagine if she was a massive X-Men fan.
Right? Oh, she would be. I agree with you that Gaga would be the best Dazzler. Natasha wouldn't be bad. Be a good candidate.
Yeah.
The pop star, blonde pop star. And she could sing a lot of different genres.
Or who I also would have seen like as a fit for it if she had ever gotten more popular was Cascada. Cascada came out that same era as Gaga. Like, she could have been a Dazzler.
And that would make more sense too, because at least the times we've seen Dazzler portrayed, it was more of like a dance, not underground, but like maybe not as mainstream, Like
yeah, she was a club hit person.
Yeah. So yeah, no, that Cascada makes sense.
Yeah, like Taylor Swift is almost too big to be Dazzler.
Yeah.
Whereas Cascada, it's like appropriate.
Yeah.
Neither of us can Photoshop that kind of shit, so. No. Rod and I just like leave the awkward pause, and we just kind of like looked at each other, and it's like, yeah, neither of us can do that.
You know what I'll do? I'll use this as a clip for Instagram and TikTok, and in that awkward pause, we'll just have generative AI.
I was gonna say use AI for it.
So we'll have Adobe Firefly do it, and because Adobe Firefly is based on its own stock library, I'm almost certain there's no X-Men references in there. So whatever you just saw is almost definitely not remotely looking like Dazzler from X-Men.
The best part is that Dazzler from X-Men has had such very different looks over the years. Mm-hmm. Like, there is the Dazzler from like the disco era with like the skates and everything like that. There is the Dazzler with the short hair that we saw in X-Men 92. There's the other version of Dazzler, which was the one from the arcade game. There's like the punk rock Dazzler from Ultimate X-Men. Like, so even if they do have it, it will still probably be confused.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if it even knows like what that would mean, because like,
just the word Dazzler
in this context. Because I used a little bit of it for my parents, their old wedding photos from when they were in Korea and got married. I'm helping them restore a couple of them. It gets wild. And like, I'm in contact with Adobe so I can give them feedback on this stuff. But like, because of the culture at the time, they weren't standing together for the wedding photos. So we were like combining them, right? And it's pretty cut and dry as far as AI goes. It's like, okay, they're in the same setting. Now let's just put them in the same photo. I initially just put combined backgrounds, but I guess it just did everything. It didn't separate my parents out of it. It combined them into a person, and it's almost racist. Delete and send report to Adobe.
Kind of love that.
So whatever Dazzler was there, unless it was objectively offensive, I put it in there. And
we will post it as long as it's not objectively offensive. Yeah.
And so well, I don't know. It might be, like, what was the one thing I sent you that one time, like last year? I tried to get earlier this year, the AI to do it, and it just like gave us a leaf instead of like an X-Man or something. And so whatever, I don't know. I've
posted some of the weird generative AI stuff too. So
yeah,
like the Dolly stuff is just like all terrifying. So every single time I do a generative AI X-Men prompt outside of the Instagram one, it always ends up looking like a different version of like the Horsemen of the Apocalypse, basically. Yeah. Like, they always look like dark and broody and should be reporting up to Apocalypse. So
I wonder if the AI is still figuring out that X-Men isn't like referring to a singular character or something, like, and so it's just referencing all these comic book characters.
It usually references 3. Like, you usually see somebody who resembles Storm, somebody who resembles Scott, and somebody who resembles Wolverine. Those are the consistencies. If you don't specify a character by name, you will usually get some form of, there's a black woman, there's a guy with a visor, and there's a guy with horns. Yeah. But they teleport into the bank.
Easy peasy.
They go in and they jump into the vault, and they go into a safety deposit box, find another ring. And that's when Scott and Wolverine break in and look like they're the ones robbing the bank.
Yeah, like the loudest, biggest. Like,
shooting the cameras out. Like, I mean, granted, I don't know what the security camera recording scenario was back then, but that seems like a good way to be found out as being, vigilantes. Gene realizes that they're there because he shoots his way into the vault and then just telekinetically tosses Scott and Wolverine. Probably enough that it should have killed Scott, realistically.
Yeah, because there's like a lot of rubble now from them breaking in and stuff.
Well, and also like throws them so hard, it is out of the vault through the front of the bank and then, across the street. And then she starts the jet and they just fuck off.
I think that was great. So she strands them. So that was like premeditated.
And then they park on the lawn of the Institute, which that had 92 vibes to me.
Yeah. and no one noticed for a little while.
So at that point, as Jean is breaking back into the Institute, you find out from a little bit of exposition dump from Beast that there are 3 Tibetan artifacts, and they have taken 2 of them at this point. Which
wait, was Sidorak Tibetan?
No.
Oh, wasn't? Okay.
No.
Still trying to type back to that.
You really want it to be Sidorak, despite the fact that we know at the end of the episode what it is.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. You don't know how they combine, retcons and stuff.
So Jean goes inside and snags Spike and Kitty, and at that point, Xavier does actually detect her presence happening within the Institute.
Yeah, it's almost like kind of spooky.
Yeah, it's here. Yeah, it's like almost like ghostly, and then you see the green face guy pop up like as a mental blocker, essentially. Mm-hmm. They realize that they're sealed in the room. Evan has spiked the door shut.
Did they all get like super powered even more from being evil? Because his spikes and everything were bigger. I
was going to talk about that later. Like, I don't think that was actually like a charged up scenario. I got it as a little bit more of just like, oh, this is what he can do when he unleashes. And I wonder if it's more about he doesn't do it more often because he's not as in control. And when he's under somebody else's influence, he doesn't need to be under control because that person doesn't care if he fucking dies. So,
and same with Jean. She's pretty effortless. She's basically like 11.
Yeah, she's very much like Dark Phoenixing right now with her power, like shy of the fire. So
she's like swiping stuff away just with her hands and stuff.
Rogue is there. She's able to get them out, and they're kind of just like recapping. And he mentions the face, and Rogue is like, "Oh yeah, that was the dude Mesmero at the carnival last week."
He's like, "So when everybody started going missing, you didn't bother to mention you went to a creepy carnival show?"
Nobody's talked to her up to this point, really.
Right. Or
she just went. Here's the thing. She went to the record store just to buy records.
I mean, same.
And then at that time, they also figure out that there's the last of these rings from this Tibetan trio is in Washington, D.C.
And they took bicycles there.
They also issued an Amber Alert.
That's for missing kids, right?
What I thought. Okay, I'm not crazy. Because when they're like, yeah, there's been an Amber Alert issued, and it's like, why are they issuing an Amber Alert? Because people are breaking into a museum in Washington.
I only know it from like a retail context. I'm looking it up, Amber Alert. Because, there's protocol in retail for like if there is an Amber Alert at
a store.
Yeah, a store, then like, like people aren't allowed to leave without identifying their children and stuff like that.
Right.
At least that's how it used to be. I haven't worked retail in 15, 20 years, but...
Yeah, this is my kid. Okay, show us your ID. My kid doesn't have a fucking ID.
So I don't know how they're doing it now, because obviously time has moved forward so much, but before, like, this was in the time when last time I was working in retail was in the time like anybody could pick up anybody's kid at the school. So in retail where I was working, they would just have us, without the parents looking, ask us to ask the parents to describe the kid's shoes, because it's the one thing an abductor couldn't change quickly. They could like throw other clothes on a kid or throw a hoodie over something, but they couldn't change their shoes because they would never know what size the kid's feet are. And so most of the time the parents, if they're trying to, unless it was super busy, most people aren't in a rush to get out, especially if they have announced an Amber Alert.
Right.
And if somebody is rushing, that's suspicious. But if someone does need to leave because we were in a mall or whatever, they'd be like, what color are the shoes your kid's wearing? And if without looking they could just tell you or whatever, then it's usually pretty okay. But I'm reading Amber Alert. Yeah, child abduction emergency.
Yeah, I have no idea why that was what was used.
America's Missing Broadcast Emergency Response.
Okay. So they land on the roof, and now it's the quartet of possessed mutants, and security pops up in there, and Spike just takes them all out. And that is absolutely we can't have him murder people scenario. But now this is more and more people who are seeing powers get used in a non-powered scenario,
Yeah.
Like, we're seeing security guards, we're seeing the stuff in New York, and it's like, it's almost starting to bubble up to the point where it can't all be urban legend, Yeah,
my note here was that all the security guards, they straight up say, like, you can't park that on the roof, which is...
They're actually pretty okay with that aspect of it, yeah.
So it's like actually realistic, like background conversation happening. And then Spike almost kills all the guards because like he had to be so surgical with where he placed all the spikes to not just straight up like go through their head and their chest, and like he just pinned them up by their clothes.
Which I think is harder than we give it credit for, because that means the clothing had to be loose enough to get pinned as opposed to puncture it through their shoulder and such.
Yeah.
I kind of like Possessed Spike better. I feel like he's doing a better job.
All of them are more competent evil. Like even Nightcrawler, he's not even hesitating. He's like poof, 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 like in a vault, like.
But they drop down through the floors. They find a room that has the other ring, and then they just teleport out. At that point, Rogue and Beast have finally picked up Scott and Wolverine when they were stranded at the other location.
They don't call it anything, but I'm guessing it's like the X-copter. Is that what they would call this?
I forgot if it had a name, and I couldn't find it when I was looking it up, because we talked about it in the Magneto episode.
Yeah, because I just noticed, because they called it the X-Van, the X-Jet, so I was like, X-copter? X-chopper? X-chopper. That's what they call it, right?
Was it? I legit don't remember.
I'm not saying from memory. I'm just saying from like convention.
It feels like very much what the action figure would have been called at that point had they gotten them. So they end up landing at the carnival roughly around the same time the X-copter arrives. They're just coming from their different angles. And Xavier does the cocky leader thing of like, keep them busy. I've got an appointment with Mesmero. And it's like, do you now?
Yeah, right.
Because he's kind of fucked up your whole team so far.
Yeah, and he pushed you out of the whatever, you're trying to communicate with Jean and everything.
So Wolverine is like, just make sure to subdue them. No one needs to get hurt. And it's like, of all people, it's like, you're the one that's going to say that.
Yeah.
And then rain starts, and then we start to get pairings, and there's nothing that's wild out of the fight scene. You get Beast and Nightcrawler who pair off, and they're just like teleporting and bouncing off of stuff. You have like the two super athletic, acrobatic people doing their thing. Then to what you, I think, were alluding to, Spike gets like full on armor with his stuff at that point.
Yeah, he has the stuff in the back that kind of almost was reminiscent of Tusk from the 92 series. You know? Like, it's almost peacocking.
Yeah, I can see it.
My note here says this was basically, even though this was way before then, like the MCU Avengers Civil War, but at a carnival in the rain.
Yes.
Because they had the face-off between the two teams and stuff.
Well, there's a classic cover, I think I've referenced it before, where you had the original X team squared off against the new X-Men team, the one that had introduced Colossus and Wolverine, and it was like Xavier making them fight was that cover. It was a mind-possessed Xavier, shocking. But yeah, there was it was like a 4v4 square off, I want to say.
Oh, very cool.
So I didn't even think of it until you mentioned the Civil War. They have some more back and forth. Scott is like teleported in the air as he's just shooting uncontrollably. And I just imagine how many people were just murdered during that scene.
How many explosions around the area and stuff.
Wolverine pops his claws, and then he sees Kitty and he's like, I can't do anything. And then she kicks him in the shins.
I was wondering about how her kicking him at all would hurt, but the shin, it looked like that was a shin guard.
He has a shin guard on top of it too.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know that's nitpicky, but it was just like
I mentioned it in the last episode where the animated wiki went kind of like apeshit on like 27 goofs or whatever. Mm-hmm. That one was listed on this episode of like, Kitty is not strong enough given Wolverine's mutant power to hurt him, and he also is wearing shin guards.
You know what would have been really dark that they wouldn't have done in a primetime kids show, like, or a Saturday morning kids show or whatever, whenever this aired, is like if she,
definitely like, Saturday morning.
If she like partially phased or something, and like just hit him like in a
scramble his brain
or something, or even just like if it's still the shin, just like fuck up like a muscle or something or whatever,
Jean is like, cool, fuck this, we're winning. Starts to walk towards the tent, and Xavier stops her, and then she proceeds to pick him up while in his chair and just like lifts him into the sky.
And then Mesmero gets the rings anyway.
Right, because Rogue goes to absorb Jean, does so successfully. Which I feel like they have to come back to this moment because we know that when she absorbs somebody, she gets part of their memories and shit. Yeah. But Jean tosses the rings to Mesmero. And then my comment was psychic nerd fight. The awkward stare down of posturing as they're like mentally fighting each other. Okay, but there was no like, it wasn't astral plane like the Shadow King or anything. It was just like, I'm staring very intently at you and you're staring very intently back at me.
It's like the Force.
Like I said, psychic nerd fight.
Yeah.
So at that point, Mesmero does actually overcome, and he like pops back into the tent. And when he does that, everybody just kind of like snaps out of it, and they don't have actually memory of what's been happening to them since their takeover. So obviously Jean for, the past day or so, Kitty and Spike for the past few hours. And Rogue is like, fuck this, and she just completely shreds the tent. And I love goth rogue makes it believable that she would just be like, fuck this guy, I'm not putting up with this, and just shreds the tent hoping that he's inside. Essentially, he's going to get caught with his pants down if he's still in there, but it's like, where'd he go?
Yeah, he got away. Yeah, my note here said that the X-Men didn't win, but Mesmero let him go.
Yeah, he's just completely gone. And then you do get the clarity from Xavier that Mesmero was under somebody else's control, and it did have to be tied to a more powerful mind. And at that point, I was sure it was going to be Sinister, and I got to stop making assumptions in this show.
I could see that, though. Who did I think that was at that time? I guess Sinister would make the most sense.
Because for me, as a reader, the only person I would have thought it would have been Mesmero possessing somebody else. Jason Wingard, which I don't think you introduced Jason without the Hellfire Club. Emma Frost, I don't think you introduce Emma without the Hellfire Club. Sinister, like, I don't consider Apocalypse a psychic control. You know,
when Xavier said he was just a puppet, I thought this was going to be an introduction of Shadow King. That's who I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, for some reason, I never got the Shadow King vibe off of this one.
Maybe it's because I was just off the editing, like the African Storm episode and stuff.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that was like probably less likely that that's the character, right? Because this is kind of like a villain of the week situation so far.
Right. Jump over. It's in Tibet. Mesmero goes into a cave and then immediately started seeing the Egyptian imagery, all the statues and the stuff carved into the wall. It was all Egyptian. I was like, oh, okay, we are getting Apocalypse. And then what they did that I thought was incredibly clever was there's like this little stick that pops out, and then he puts the 3 rings onto the stick, and that became a key. And I never would have thought of that. I thought that was an incredible, like, if they came up with it, that's amazing. If they took that from like a D&D campaign or something like that, it was still such a cool visual. Because it's like, what's the rings? Because this isn't the Mandarin from Iron Man and that kind of stuff. We know it's not going to take that route. So I thought that was a really cool moment. So he takes the key, puts it in, there's this big shiny light, and there's like this evil laugh. And at that point, it was basically all but confirmed to be Apocalypse. And then you see that there's actually multiple doors. And the first door, which was literally just a keyhole, there's now a door with a giant red scarab on the front of it. And he's like, yep, I did what you asked me to. And it's like, well, you got the first one open, and now you got to get the other 2. And it's like, we're getting something that's going to stretch across multiple episodes out of this one for us.
I didn't know it was going to be Apocalypse until he actually said it. And I was like, who is it going to be? And because I guess I didn't recognize all the Egyptian stuff. When you're saying it was a cool key kind of component or whatever, it was like, it's not the same, but it had like that Kingdom Hearts energy. So it would be hilarious if like he opens up that door and like Goofy comes out and he's like, the power of friendship reunited us.
Dude, I can't with Kingdom Hearts. I mean, I just can't. I'm sorry. I know it's a fandom and people love it, but I cannot deal with that narrative. It is the most confusing thing I think I've ever watched a recap video on. And I've watched 45-minute Mortal Kombat recap videos.
Yeah, right. Do you see the Kingdom Hearts recap where the guy starts on one wall?
I can already tell you no.
I think you would like this one because it just gets funny because he's trying to do like the hero's journey or whatever. So it's this like circle thing or whatever. And then he's like, well, we have to go over to this wall for that one. And then there's like a bench in the middle of the room and stuff. Because like, same. I enjoy the Kingdom Hearts games, but friends all the time ask me like, how do you keep track of the story? He's like, easy. I don't. Because you can't. There's like mobile games, handheld games and stuff. Yep. I think there's one for like a Nokia phone, I think, at one point. And like it has
like the Nokia N-Gage or whatever the hell it was.
And it had like a critical part of the story in it, but you can't even play it anymore. It's like, I can't. And even within its own game, it's like tough, but
it is somehow more convoluted than Evangelion, and Evangelion has 37 different timelines.
Oh wow, yeah, I don't follow Evangelion, so.
But X-Men, and that's where you do get to your point. The reveal that he is working for Apocalypse, which is a great cliffhanger for an episode because Mesmero as a character, I could not give a shit about, but knowing he's tied to Apocalypse, now I actually am invested in him.
And it's not Mystique this time.
Well, Mystique is on Team Magneto. So yeah.
I wasn't familiar with Mesmero before this, at least that I know of.
No, you're not. You're definitely not.
If I was, I'd seen him in some other iteration. I like that either this storyline could continue next episode or next season, and it wouldn't make a difference. It's like a nice, it's a cliffhanger, like you said, but it's like a kind of foreshadowing, like MCU stuff, where like something could be teased and then like not pay off till 4 years later or something. Yeah.
It was a good episode overall. I see why it had the rating it did. I think, similar to what we've talked about with the Marvels, you get a little bit of a bonus bump in your points because you have the big reveal at the end of it. Yeah. So it already starts out as a good baseline, but it's like, oh, I know I'm getting this other thing because of it, and that helps it out as well.
I think my favorite part of this episode was, even though they were evil, or maybe this is part of why it was more fun, was it was nice to see them all like competent in their powers, Like, it's been fun seeing the teenagers and, getting used to their literally being in their skin, but seeing like Jean have like 100% control over whatever limited power she has at that point. Spike, yep. Nightcrawler, they're all like working without the inefficiencies of stumbling over each other. It was kind of cool. It's like, oh man, this is what they're gonna be, in a few years.
Yeah, and I think part of that is like whether you call it confidence or just zero hesitation, because there is no fear of what happens if I mess up. Well, the guy who's controlling you really doesn't care as long as he gets his ring. So if you mess up and you die, he just moves on to the next one.
Yeah, because it's just a puppet of a puppet.
Yeah. What I am curious about is how much does Mesmero, and by proxy Apocalypse, know about the X-Men? Because he knew, get Jean, because Jean is the psychic and could do the telekinetic powers. He knew that Nightcrawler is the teleporter. Did he know that because of possessing Jean, or did they know that in advance? Like, there's lots of little open threads right now for this to follow.
We're used to seeing Apocalypse kind of being like the
puppet master.
I say Kingpin, but not in the Marvel character Kingpin, but like a mob Kingpin, Mm-hmm. Like, the pieces are very intentional.
Right.
So obviously they can do whatever they want with them. They can change the storyline, but it would make sense if he's just like kind of aware of how timelines go and then executes, or Mesmero is literally like his literal eyes, depending on how the enchantment works or whatever. Because he communicated him without speaking. He was like, oh yes, that's where it is. And we just didn't hear anything. So who knows?
From this, there is a reference to the original X-Men number 111. In the X-Men book that would become Uncanny X-Men when they did the name change reboot on it. So the original retail price on it was 35 cents, but it was Mesmero basically at a carnival possessing the X-Men to be a part of his carnival thing, and Jean and Nightcrawler were part of that possessed group.
Oh, okay. So they did reference some original, source material. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, let me save that image so it can get uploaded to our Instagram. The other one, they mention on IMDb a character who debuts in this episode that has a larger part to play with Kurt. That did not happen, and I used my IMDb Pro account to edit it because it was incorrect information.
Okay, gotcha. Nice.
Yeah, it was like,
good use.
From what I could tell, it is something that happens in the next episode, based on the name and the character stuff in it. But I looked at it and I was like, they introduced blank. And I'm not going to say it, not that you would even know the name anyway, because it's a secondary level character. Mm-hmm. But it was like, wait, did I? And then I started looking at other wikis and it was like, oh no, that character's name does not pop up until the following episode. And I was just like,
oh, they just messed up the episode numbers.
No, I mean, it literally was written in, it's under the description of what the episode is. So somebody just literally flubbed the trivia of introduce this character. And I'm like, no, they didn't.
As we find a spoiler off for next episode, it was also Mystique.
Well, it's also one of those things of, it kind of reminds you, as much as some people have done amazing research and some of these wikis, like the animated fandom, that thing has detailed step by step by step by step of an entire episode written out. But at the same time, it's this is all generated by people. It's not anywhere official. So people make mistakes. Mm-hmm. And that's why we see episode orders on 2 different locations being different and such. So I don't know, it was kind of that not sobering moment, but also it's also kind of why I like to reference where I get something from if I didn't come up with it myself or from my own memory, because shit isn't always right. So
I don't know if you're familiar with a creator named JJ McCullough. He's one of my more favorite, and I actually got to meet him at VidCon. I was at a Nebula dinner and he was there, but he has a video about why he hates Wikipedia for crucial research, shit about X-Men cartoons, whatever, that's
right.
Fine, doesn't hurt anybody.
Things that are not going to ruin people's lives, it's fine. Yeah,
but he was saying Wikipedia has kind of ruined the research like skills for a lot of people, because not because of Wikipedia inherently, but it's because of the nature of the internet. One source could be incorrect, get referenced somewhere else, and then the original incorrect reference is what someone else uses to substantiate.
And it substantiates 75 reposts.
Yeah, and then it kind of goes in a circle. So they all like kind of verify each other, but it's all based off the one thing that was incorrect to begin with. And that often culminates at Wiki, because Wiki will, like, you can cite like 20 sources, but all those 20 sources could have originally gone back to like the one incorrect one or something. So
yeah. No, I've definitely seen that. I mean, we talked about it. There was mention of something in season 1 where the concept art for, I think it was Spike or something like that, went to a dead link.
Oh yeah.
So it's like, cool, that reference, I don't know what you're referencing. Like, was it a text interview? Was it an audio interview? Was it a video interview? Considering it was hosted on probably like a GeoCities website, I don't think it was a video interview, you know?
I miss GeoCities. That was so fun with all like the overstimulating GIFs and things all around the screen.
The MySpace HTML all over it and such too. Yeah.
Like glitter stars and stuff.
So, Rod, final thoughts for you?
Cool episode. Overall, not a lot happened, but it was a setup. It was like the prelude to the Apocalypse Saga, so that was really cool.
I love how you say not a lot happened, and we've been recording for an hour and 10 minutes.
Well, yeah. Well, when I say that in the sense of like, you could summarize the lasting effects of this episode really quickly, you know? But there's other episodes where like, okay, you need to know all these things.
Yeah, it was
Those.
It was a plot-driven episode as opposed to a character-driven episode. End of the day, nobody's relationship is going to change for it. You know, there's that ultimate out from Jean of like, oh, I didn't know what was going on, and nobody's going to like have hard feelings for her for doing this. But I think this is going to be the start of kind of like between this and the On Angel's Wings episode, where people start talking more about mutants, whether or not they call them mutants, but like the powered monsters, I think becomes more of a thing with it within the next 2 or 3 episodes is my gut check.
That'll be fun. And also, I say that, you know, not a lot happened with the caveat of like, I think in retrospect, depending on how this Apocalypse storyline goes, this episode could become better to me, or not better, like more involved to me based on how the story goes. Yeah. This is kind of like, you know, its own little mini like Infinity Saga, because he's literally looking for rings and stuff. But now that we know there's 2 other doors, and we don't even necessarily know if the keys are more rings or just something else. And so it's a fun little journey that we know there's more than one other part.
Right, because if you look at that other door, there was nothing that looked, at least quickly to me, like a keyhole. It was like that, like I said, it was that giant red ruby scarab.
Yeah.
Like, does he just grab Scott's head and holds it in front of it?
Right. He's like, you have to go find Moon Knight. All of them.
Thank you guys for watching us. If you have any thoughts, make sure to drop them into the comments for either the YouTube upload or the official Instagram post for this episode. If you like what you heard, we'd appreciate a rating on the podcast app of your choosing. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. And we have one last episode for 2023, and then they will drop magically all of X-Men 97 on us the next day.
Yeah.
Sorry, the day before.
I guess we should also we'll address the next episode, but like we're taking a couple of weeks off for the holidays. If you joined us in the middle of all this, it's a good opportunity to go check out the other, like 100 some odd episodes or something. I forget what number we're at now.
We're in this, we have not crossed 100 yet. We're close. We should look that up.
I gather that you could even just never stop listening and still it would take the full break to not be done to listen. So this point is
we do talk a lot. Yeah. We had 2 episodes about fucking Nightcrawler, for God's sake.
Yep, that was a good one.
Also, there's nobody listening still at this point. This is us just talking to ourselves.
Leave a comment if you listen to this.
If you stayed till the bitter end, just tell us. We're genuinely curious.